I've been looking forward to this one for a long time because one of my earliest really interested in Verona history memories was in high school. I walked by this plaque that was just sitting in the middle of this field that said something about Verona having a leper colony. And when I was like, what was going on? I had no idea. So that kind of stuck with me, and I showed my friends, and I started researching it kind of more recently and started finding out the stories. And then, I don't remember if you told me about your story or if I remembered it. But yeah, so Jim and Melissa are here from the Verona Press, and they're going to talk about this awesome story and all the research they did back in 2008, was it? I think. Cool. Is this one of those ones that just sticks in your mind, or is it just another story among thousands and millions of stories you heard? Okay, great. Everyone, please give it up for Jim and Melissa.
That's okay. The only problem is you suggesting that I'm a good speaker. I don't know about that. We'll see. Yeah, if only I could do that. So, as he said, I'm Jim Prarie. I'm the editor of the Verona Press. Some of you probably recognize me or know me. I've met a lot of you. And this is my partner in crime, Melissa Seymour. We actually hadn't seen each other for about 7 years until we got together the other day to talk about this.
Thank you.
Yes, she was an intern when she was in high school, and this was the first assignment that I came up with. She sat down there taking these notes, being just very interested in being part of putting together a newspaper, and I said, well, one thing I kind of like to do is research what happened to these gravestones. So it was this, it wasn't this, I didn't plan on assigning this big, complicated feature story to a 15-year-old. But but that's what ended up happening, and it turned a very simple thing became much more interesting. It became a story about an insane asylum, a leper colony, all these forgotten people who were never treated very well in the first place, and you know, at the time it was still surrounded by mostly empty land, but the farming fleet was going in, and the county had just decided to sell this piece of land that was to the north and to the east of it. That was an extension of the hospital that they had up there. And this was back when you still had the smokestack up there, and it was still this big, kind of very old, some might say creepy building. And so I knew that at some point, I mean, I didn't know. Right now, there's a Taco Bell, there's a pizza ranch, there's going to be a fitness studio to the north of it, there's going to be a diner right next to it, and maybe something in a grocery store in theory. We'll see about that. But at the time, it wasn't there. We didn't know it was going to take 8 years to get to this point, but we knew that it was coming. So I could see this little piece of land that was just, it looked like empty open parkland. It's just a big green nothing. And people having no idea why it was there or what it was. You know, there's a bike trail next to it, and I was envisioning what would happen if a person riding a bike, you know, just got off and just started walking through the cemetery. I mean, today I was in a business meeting in Dubuque, and in my breaks I went out hunting Pokemon. And one of the best places to hunt Pokemon is the cemeteries. It's strange because they have statues, because cemeteries are sort of permanent places that they know aren't going to change like businesses do. So I was out at the cemetery just getting little Pokestops, and I was, you know, thinking as I'm walking along, like, you know, I don't want to step over any graves, you know. Walk kind of funny to avoid that, but if you go to the Badger Prairie Cemetery, you have no idea where the graves are. If you really, really look close, you can sort of tell, but it's really hard to tell. And you certainly wouldn't know if you were just walking through. So if you didn't see that big sign, you might just think it's a big piece of parkland. So I thought that was kind of weird, and we should just find out what happened to gravestones. So I had Melissa look into it. She came back to me every once in a while, and she just started looking around and poking around and asking questions, and she came up with most of the story. And then at the end of it, she was out of town, and I was like, oh, I got an open space in the cover. Perfect time to run this story. So I'll just finish it up really quickly, and I went over to the Wisconsin Historical Society, and I looked up the records of people who might have lived at the Dane County Asylum, that it was called then, because they stopped putting people in the cemetery in 1950, I'm sorry. And I found some very, very odd, interesting stories, and I can come back to that, but let me explain them.
Hi. Oh, I like sitting. It's less intimidating. So like Jim said, I was an intern at the Verona Press. I think one of the first or second interns, and also writing the police reports, which was really fun. I remember getting a really funny story about a squirrel, somebody calling the police about a squirrel, and this being this huge thing, and talking to the cops about that. So that's something that also sticks in my mind. So this was about 8 years ago, and I was 15, so forgive me if I forget any details. I'm really sorry if I mess anything up. I'll do my best. So if you're looking at the street, like Jim said, it's sort of right, the land was right up against a prime development plot. Behind that is Farm and Fleet, and then to the right of that is where the old west wing of the hospital was, and now it's the new like health center, healthcare center. So, and like Jim said, the bike path weaves through there. So one of my first contacts was Sandy Everson, who was a former medical records secretary at the hospital. And if I remember correctly, I think I just showed up and I was like, hi, can you tell me something about this story or about this research? And she was super helpful and just so passionate, and it was just amazing being able to talk to so many people that were so passionate about protecting the cemetery. And I believe Sandy then connected us to Gladys Banky and Jerry Maurer, who was Gladys was a former employee of the hospital as well. And they were both on a committee that protected the cemetery, if that's correct. Yeah, so we're still checking in about things.
They were instrumental in getting that sign.
Right, the big monument. So from there was lots of concern from that committee about how close the construction was coming to the cemetery land. So, and like Jim said, it wasn't very visible. There wasn't a whole lot to show that it was there. I think there were a few like marble posts. Oh, yeah, awesome. But no gravestones. And that was concerning because, well, for a lot of reasons, but because there were quite a few people buried there, and in the research we discovered that there was very little respect for or care taken of the bodies of the people there, and we sort of, like Jim said, learned a lot about the people who were buried there. And
they were often put in just shrouds, just dig a hole and wrap them up in a piece of cloth and throw them in. No ceremony, just throw them in.
Right. So, and because of that, because they were unmarked graves, a lot of people were concerned that bodies would be buried outside of the perimeter. Not 100% sure if they were all in this area that the posts marked. So where did the gravestones go? And I think Sandy ended up pointing me to this family who would like to remain anonymous, but a family who lives on Wayland Road had the gravestones in their garden being used as stepping stones. And I heard from several people, this is sort of in the research, an employee who mowed the grass at the hospital was told to get rid of them, or was annoyed of them, or there are a few different ideas behind that.
One thing I remember pretty distinctly is that he would pick up the gravestones, maybe just some of them that were sticking up, every time he mowed, and after a while he got kind of tired of picking them up and put them in a pile, and sometimes they just get left in a pile. And for a while, the pile of stones was just sitting there, and then eventually.
Right, so eventually he brought them back to his home in his backyard, which is where this family that I mentioned who lives on Wayland Road now live. And I actually talked to the mom in this family this week, and I thought it was great. She still calls herself the keeper of the Dane County gravestones. I thought that was nice. So the committee that I mentioned before did so much to protect this plot of land and mark the plot as untouchable. And I believe that there was a map found in the basement of the hospital with numbers correlating to the grave markers in the Wayland family, the grave markers that were in the Wayland family's backyard. So those matched up with the map and the names. And then that committee, the library was awesome. So the committee also wrote an informal history of the Dane County Hospital. I think that was in 1993. And so that was great to check out. And there's also a ledger with 500 names corresponding with the numbers on the gravestones. So, and I believe that's also what led me to the research about the leper colony that was off of County PB. And my memory there is still pretty foggy. I don't know if there's a whole lot that you remember from.
There was definitely something off of PB. The question is whether it was a leper colony. I believe it was some kind of place where sick people were at, but it's never really been proven clearly or not clearly whether or not there actually were people with leprosy there, but obviously it gained sort of a legend, and it was enough for them to put it. If you can see on the sign, it says leper colony right there. So.
Yep. Yes. Heard it talk like George Whistler, and that's something probably should contact him to do considerable research. He thinks he knows where the site of the cottage where the lepers were housed in isolation. He was the dog park.
Yeah, it's off of County PB. Yeah, I did read. I think he had something in the State Journal many years ago, and we did consult that. But again, we had this wasn't the main thing that we were looking at, so we kind of took a quick look at it to see is there or isn't there, and we weren't really sure. But do you remember? Yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on that point too.
Oh, yep.
There's also a very large produce farm across from
Right, the poor farm, and after some federal legislation in I think 1970, that outlawed using the labor of people who lived there to make a farm happen, so that they had to close down the farm because they didn't have tons of people doing that anymore. And so that of course brings up a debate. Well, does that help give them something to do, or was it abusing them? And people are on both sides of that, but it's kind of interesting how they used to have that. So it was on
half of the barn somewhere. I didn't hear where it went, and then they tore down the second half for the construction for the parking lot.
right. Yeah, they moved a lot. They had they really only kept one building that I can remember in all that construction. That was in
Probably
2010
years before
maybe.
when they stopped farming there. They
Yeah.
cut that barn in half, moved half of it.
Yeah. That was it was the Dane County Poor Farm was on the south side, kind of where the Military Ridge Trail parking lot is, and then it was called the Dane County Asylum was on the north side. Did you have?
I feel like that, just going back and forth, there were so many different tidbits of information because it started with a research project and I did not know where the story was going to go, but it led in so many different directions, and I don't know, I've been reading it over and over recently for this presentation, and I just can't believe that I was able to work on something like this when I was 15 because it's so cool. Sorry, I get really excited about things like this. But
What I forgot to tell you is that after she graduated high school, then she went off to college in Minnesota, and while you were in college, right, she wrote several books that were about famous women and interviewed. Who were the people that you interviewed?
like Gloria Steinem and Melinda Gates and Chelsea Handler. It's a little crazy. But
Yeah. Now she's an editor at the for American Girl Publishing. Some of the stories about the people who were buried in the cemetery, when she finished all that research and we had the whole thing together, and it just felt like I needed a personal connection with the people who were in there. Can you find that spot for me? We found very odd stories. We found, I would flip through pages, and some of them were very innocuous and just somebody who died at the age of 80 and we didn't know if they were in there and had a very, very limited amount. Sometimes it was just a first name. But a lot of times it would have, this is the reason that the person is there. And it wasn't really clear what it meant by reason. Like, it could be the reason that the person went crazy and therefore was in the asylum, or it could be the reason that the person was destitute and needed somewhere to live. And it seemed to me like the records were all from the asylum, and so when you would see these notations about why they were in there, for example, one of them said apoplexy due to religious excitement, and it was like, oh, okay. So I don't really know what that means, but I can kind of guess. And another one, it just really stuck out at me. It was a woman who was, did it say how old she was? You know which one I'm going to, right? Yep. Here.
so
Yeah, that's okay. A 30-year-old Irish servant named Kate Higgins from the town of Madison. She was committed in 1883, and her cause of insanity was listed as probable result of pregnancy by Negro. Yeah. Another who might or might have been married there, married a man who, when she was 17 years old, who was 80, and so she ran away. And another married a man who she learned afterward had another wife, and then she ended up going there. Somebody else was in Chicago and got beat up and kind of went nuts apparently, and had to be committed there. And so you had all kinds of odd stories. There were immigrants who just didn't really know what to do, and they would end up living there. And it was in the 50s, 1850s, I think. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Was it 1970 something when they closed it?
Well, I mean, it's changed over time. In 1970 is when they shut down the Poor Farm, and I'm a little fuzzy on some of the details, but different parts of the hospital grew over time. At the time that they started tearing it down, the oldest part was the West Wing, and I think that was in the 1880s or 1890s. But there were parts of the hospital that were older than that had been torn down over time to make room for other pieces. So it's sort of an evolving thing.
The Poor Farm was long gone before that.
Yeah. I just know it was around 1970.
No, I mean the other building.
Oh yeah, I don't know about that one.
Well, that would have been torn down when the new home was built.
No, I'm talking about the courthouse.
Right.
That would have been about where Farm and Fleet is.
Right.
Not.
No, I was talking about the
Two
old.
buildings,
Okay, I was talking about the original courthouse.
yeah, but I'm saying there was one that was
Yeah.
there before that.
That wasn't the part I looked into, so I don't really have anything. I mean, I looked into that to the asylum and the Poor Farm, and then later on when they were tearing down when they were tearing down the West Wing and other elements, I was looking into the history of that too. But again, I ran into some trouble with that. Jeremy, you have a question?
Do you know how they came about, the 4 posts that mark the corners of the cemetery? Do you know how they settled on that being the boundaries of it, and how much certainty there is as to that really being the boundary?
I'm pretty sure that was a guess.
Okay.
Because when they did surveyors, and I go back to this photo I had here, when they had surveyors come out, you can see this is where, I think this is like gas lines, and then there's like electric lines or something like that. I mean, you can see that it's kind of a difficult angle, but it runs this way. And so that's definitely inside the boundaries marked by the post. And this is super close to it, like 4 feet.
I remember something about, I don't know if this was something that Phil Salkins had to do with, but they actually brought in ground penetrating radar at one point, I think, to try to figure out if they could find evidence of these graves, particularly outside the boundary.
Right, and then that's not an unusual thing when they have new development in an area where there might possibly be graves. They do that with Native American burial mounds and whatnot too. They usually have an archaeological survey. So I know that they had to look pretty closely at it. I don't know exactly what technology they used, but.
Okay. Yeah.
There were also a couple burials from that cemetery that were moved by a family to the Verona Cemetery.
I had heard that. Did you get any research on that?
A little bit, but I remember at the time not having enough research
They're listed
to.
in Pine Creek. It's in the text for the listing. There's also cemetery plots in Verona for the father and then the son who later ran the poor farm. And a lot of the family members that were involved in it are buried in Verona Cemetery.
That's interesting.
One of the comments that was made on Facebook by a classmate that went to St. Andrews, he remembers this, whenever there was a Catholic person there that was going to be buried in this cemetery, and they had the mass at St. Andrews, the 7th and 8th graders, if there was no family or friends, the 7th and 8th graders would go to the mass so that there would be someone there to pray for their souls and remember them. And that would be like 61, 62 at that point, that he remembered going to masses for people from the county farm.
Can I get his name afterwards?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And I'm not sure exactly where that was that they would be buried, because it is my understanding, if I remember correctly, it was 18, did we write this down in the story? It was 1950 is when they stopped burying people in that plot here. So I don't know where they were burying them after
Or maybe
that.
they were married or something. He just remembered that
Right,
coming
right.
from
But
the
that's cool.
county
That's a
farm,
neat story.
they would pray at the masses.
Any reference to the orchard that was on top of the cemetery?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I do not know anything about that.
Oh, yes.
I would love to hear.
There used to be fruit trees in that lot.
Part of their
That was between the two buildings.
next to the cemetery.
Between the two buildings, between the old building that they tore down and the one that's there, the consolidated kitchen that's there now, and the Badger Prairie Health Command. What is it?
The order they were in or anything.
My recollection was that they had, some sort of system
Yeah.
of rows,
But
but I
between-
couldn't tell which way it
between
went.
Farmer Street and
I was never able to find anything. I mean,
Building.
that's what I wanted to do, was to be able to say, this person, that number, right here, and we were not able to do that.
So,
I think it might be in this book.
Is it?
This is the book that my dad seemed to have several boxes
that
of
the one you had used?
And most of them were relocated to my condo. So this morning I was on an archaeological dig. I think this might be exactly what you're looking for, because this is the record and there's names next to a number and they're all a grid. I'm not sure, but. and I
Yeah,
don't know
we
if
got
the
something like that from the library,
And I
yeah.
think that's what I saw, but is there any type of map?
Well,
That
I'm
would-
not sure if this is all that, if there's a map in here or not.
Sure.
But
Yeah, that would be great to flip through, because I bet it might be the same one that I was looking through.
Just a point on that orchard, my mom Gladys said that the trees were north of the cemetery, or, north, not in the cemetery. Right.
And-
want for them to go
In
there?
the story, she had said to, that she would definitely give them back, or if there was a place for them, and just nothing ever really came of it, so she said for now, she'll keep them safe in their backyard.
I had sort of hoped that after we ran the story that there would be some sort of a connection that people would make, because that's part of the reason to do stories like this, is to get people talking about it, to get somebody to say, you know what, we can do this, and never heard anything, so. Yeah, oh, hold on, Kim was next.
I was just gonna say, just getting a little more focused on those stones. God, there's a guy who used to own that home on Wayland Road, was, I think his title was Assistant Superintendent. You know his name, but anyway, he was an assistant, you know, one of the bosses there, and
That sounds
somehow,
familiar.
I was kind of shocked to hear that, knowing that they own that home, but that's what, so that's just focusing a little more on who actually ended up with those.
I mean, I believe that they were removed for safekeeping,
Oh, it could be.
because they were just sitting there
Well, it
piled
could
up.
be, I'm just saying.
Yeah, right, right, and so that would make sense, and I sort of remember something like that, I just, it's a little fuzzy, it was 8 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, Jeremy.
Just curious, about how many people are we talking here? I mean, we can all, when we drive by, we can see about how big of a chunk of land is, but how many people are you aware
Have you
of?
seen the story? I thought it was like 500 or 300 or
We had
something.
500 in Belanger, but we're not sure if that was just, like, in that plot of land, if that also included the leper colony, if that, right, so, but 500 was
Wow.
my understanding.
It wouldn't fit there.
Right, which is why,
Well, if you think about the unceremonious burials they were given,
right,
I mean, who knows?
it's just so, yeah, it's hard
Especially if there
to,
was some kind of disease at the time.
Well, it could easily be.
You see the rows, you get 20 or 30 across, 25 up down.
Are you aware there's a blog on this?
I came across it just recently when I was trying to jog my memory.
Created.
Oh, you did? Awesome.
If anybody wants to get to it, the easiest way is to search on Google for Verona Cemetery, Wisconsin, because there's other Verona cemeteries. And then there's a tab there pertaining to it.
Awesome. I saw it. It's a great plug.
Is there any way, Jim, that you could rerun that in the Verona Press again? I'm sure you don't look on repeating articles, but I think there's a lot of people that would like to hear about that again. Is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would have to come up with a fresh perspective on it. I mean, we wouldn't just rerun the story because, you know, it's out there, it's history, it's printed, but, you know, if there was an advancement in it, if there was something, I don't know.
I think there's the archive version is, you can find it online pretty easily, so maybe we could post that on like the Verona Press Facebook page or.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, awesome.
It's on VeronaHistory.com as well, your article.
Yeah. Was it also in the blog?
I think so. Yep, not in like a PDF version, but just the copy.
Yeah, there was a link on the Facebook page.
Did you have a question?
You think did you say you talked to the Wayland Road lady recently?
Yep, yeah, I did just like a couple days ago.
Be amenable to getting those up if we had it as a project somehow?
I didn't ask her I didn't ask her that, but just based on what she said in the original article, she had said that she asked someone like 8 years ago about taking the stones or putting them in a different place, and there just wasn't a whole lot of interest or follow-up.
Yeah, it's my understanding she was thinking of coming tonight, but decided that might risk, you know, anonymity.
Yes.
So,
I know Gladys Lakey's here. I've been really curious. There's some folks who are here who are involved in putting the plaque up. Would anyone mind sitting like just a couple minutes on what the effort was like to get the plaque there, or how that started? I've been curious about that since I came across from high school. Not to put you on the spot, but I think it might be kind of fun to add on. You guys don't mind?
absolutely. My reporting on that, really, I just kind of followed up what Carl, I think it was Carl had written in the press back in the 90s when we put the stone up.
Say something about
My question is just if there's anyone here who was involved in putting the plaque up, I'd like to hear a couple, just a few sentences on what that effort was like and how that got started. It was a year ago, that too. wasn't it?
Yeah, it's fun. Gladys was there.
Jerry Maurer was part of it, he's no longer with us, and Harlan Wall as well. Yeah.
the committee and so how it came about.
The monument, putting up the monument.
How they came about with the monument.
Well, there's a group of us, and discussed that, we thought,
A group of us were discussing, we felt that the cemetery should be identified. And that's how it came about that this monument was put up. Part of it was donated by Peckman's Memorials, but the rest of it we had paid for, so that it was identified. But I can remember yet, as a small child, when there was burials being made out there. 'Cause I've lived in Verona since 1937, and the old county home was below the road, below Highway 18. And like for instance, there was one mother that had two small children. And back then, of course, there was no social services to help people like, in that position. And she came with those two small children to the old county home to live. So then she would go over up to what was called the asylum, and they had a laundry. And she would go up there to work. So she felt that she was helping, contributing something to their keep. And Lizzie, the daughter, lived to be quite old. And the last name was Dorman. And her brother was in the mental hospital. But back then, even if a person wasn't very intelligent, and they had no other place to live, then they put them in the mental hospital. But Lizzie would go up and help in the laundry, and she'd fold clothes and do things like that. So that's what I remember of that part. But I had worked over there for years and years and years, and so I knew a lot about that place.
the building across the road on the south side.
It was the old poorhouse, it was called.
Right.
The poorhouse, and it was down below the road.
Yeah.
And it was people that, they had, we didn't have social services, so if they had no place to live, that's where they went. And sometimes, like this one mother came with those two children there to live.
That was a lovely building.
It was.
With a circular driveway.
Mhm.
That was still here.
Yeah. And see, back then, a lot of those people that were in the mental hospital, they worked out on the farm. And, helped with all the farm work out there.
So then, also, Jerry Bauer was involved, Maryland. His wife is here, his daughter, Diane, and she had dug out some of the information. Who else was on the committee?
I think Harlan was.
Harlan dug, a lot of old timers would remember
Art,
Harlan.
you're part of the pictures, you were the.
Art was on the picture, art president.
Was Mrs. Kinsey?
They dedicated.
Well, there was Clara Lingard, Jerry Maurer, Harlan Delk, Betty Sharp, and myself, And then George Wenke was with Dane County and Edgar Lingard. And then when this monument was dedicated, Reverend Dr. Mark Ures and Art Cressy was also there.
What I remember about it was, we were going through the ceremony of dedicating that monument. Why, it happened to be a huge Harley Davidson motorcycle rally. And it was very difficult to hear the speakers because cycles were going by the hundreds, literally the hundreds.
Were there a lot of people at that dedication ceremony?
Not a lot, no. Pretty much what you see in the picture is who was there.
What year was that, Art?
93. Well, the committee consisted of Harlan Delk, Betty Sharp, Walter Kitsky, Edgar and Clara Lingard, Jerry Mauler, Gladys Benke, Walter Badker, Burr Weiland, and LeMay Weiland. So that was the committee that got this whole monument issue going. So.
You guys are right about this being something that kind of resonates with people in the crowd. Well, cool. I mean, if you guys want to come up and talk to Melissa and Jim afterwards, and I'd love to see some of those materials you brought along as well. Oh, George, you have another question?
A comment. If anybody wants to find out if someone might have been buried here, there is in findgrave.com a Dane County Cemetery listing, and under that, someone has taken all of the listings from the Historical Society and created listings for them, and I had added to that, and some of those have text in them.
For this specific little
Yeah.
plot. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've added a lot, like, in my research, you can go out on the internet and find lists of people that were in there on a certain date in the hospitals. And then I've added information to it.
I don't know, Ruth, I think you're talking about the little project, huh? Maybe reunite some stones with some, that'd be a development, right, to get in the paper again? Yeah, I don't know. Cool, well, Jessica.